You can see these US-style canisters, which can get this large.
What are the risks if you take loads of it?
Depriving your brain of oxygen gives feelings of euphoria, but it also does not do your brain any favours. It can cause nerve damage, and the worst case scenario is hypoxia, which is when the brain's seriously deprived of oxygen.
It's in TikTok trends, hip-hop lyrics, and it's in the air at parties. Laughing gas, or nitrous oxide, has been used safely in medicine for centuries, but it's also become a go-to party drug. You might have seen the little silver canisters littering the streets after raves or festivals, or seen videos of people inhaling it and then getting the giggles. But behind the buzz, users have also reported paralysis, even brain damage, and a few have died. So today, you're going to hear how the pandemic changed the way people take laughing gas and why it's still so popular, despite the crackdowns. I'm Hannah Gelbart, and this is What in the World from the BBC World Service. And joining us here in the studio is BBC journalist Eve Webster. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Hannah. Thanks for having me.
So we're talking about laughing gas. It's also known as hippie crack and whippets. What exactly is it and why do people use it?
So the chemical composition is nitrous oxide, and people have been taking it to get high for centuries. It also has a lot of legitimate uses, but it essentially deprives your brain of oxygen for a short amount of time, which makes you feel like feelings of euphoria, everything's funny, everything's a laugh, but the high is very short. It's only a couple of minutes long.
What are the risks if you take loads of it?
Well, depriving your brain of oxygen does not do your brain any favours. It can lead to a vitamin B12 deficiency, which will lead to spinal degradation. It can cause nerve damage, and the worst case scenario is hypoxia, which is when the brain's seriously deprived of oxygen for long periods of time, which can lead to incontinence, paralysis, and in a few cases, even death.
I saw some cases of people who had to use wheelchairs for the rest of their lives after taking too much of it. And you spoke to the family of someone who died from using it.
Yes, so Meg Caldwell from Florida in the US started using nitrous oxide about 8 years ago, kind of casually at parties. But over the past 4 or 5 years, her sisters have told me her use just went up massively to the extent that she was hospitalised several times. She spent time in rehab clinics. She lost the use of her legs. She was incontinent. And eventually they believe that she overdosed on nitrous oxide in the car park of a smoke shop where she'd just bought some.
And she was just 29.
She was 29. It's very sad. Her family are now campaigning for greater restrictions on selling the substance in the US. I have to say, they haven't yet received the coroner's report, but she had a long history of addiction with the substance. So they really think that her long health decline was down to her repeated use of it.
Is it an addictive substance then? What does the research say?
There needs to be more research to definitively answer that, but it seems pretty clear that it's not physically addictive in the same way that alcohol or opioids like heroin are. It's not your body really asking for another hit of it, but experts do say it can be psychologically addictive. People like Meg, they become dependent on it. You know, I heard a story of a woman who was in a rehab facility, and she said even when she was in there using a wheelchair, trying to get use of her legs back, all she could think about was taking the substance again. So although it might not physically addict you, mentally, psychologically, it really seems like it can.
You mentioned that Meg died in a car park after buying laughing gas from a vape shop, and that's become increasingly common, especially since the pandemic. How has the way that people are taking it, how's that changed in recent years?
So in the US, unlike a lot of other countries, you can buy nitrous oxide pretty easily as it's sold as a culinary product. You can use it in restaurants to whip cream, but it seems that the place that most people buy it are what are called smoke shops in the US. This is where you can buy all sorts of smoking paraphernalia, so that vapes, bongs, grinders, all of these kind of things, pipes, and laughing gas. So you mentioned at the beginning the sight of little silver canisters are pretty common after raves and parties, but they are kind of going out of fashion and have been replaced by far bigger canisters getting up to as large as 2 kilos rather
So like
than.
that big. Because the ones
Yeah.
I've seen, sometimes here in London you see them, they're like that big.
Well, increasingly, even here in London, where it's completely legal, you can see these US style canisters, which can get this large. Companies also started flavouring the gas and started packaging them in kind of more appealing designs. So rather than just the plain silver canisters, they now have like cartoon characters on there. They're brightly coloured, neon, and marketing them under names like Miami Magic, Galaxy Gas, things like that. Experts say that this has led to an uptick in people using the drug, and the Food and Drug Administration in the US have said that they've noticed an increase in reports of the adverse effects of people using nitrous oxide.
I'm going to pause you there because we're speaking to Ezra Marcus, who's an investigative reporter in the US. Hi, Ezra.
Hey, good morning.
And to you. So, what is the culture around laughing gas in the US like now?
5 years ago, during the pandemic, it sort of had a wave of popularity, and then it became really widely available in a way that it hadn't really been before through smoke shops. It sort of fell into this, I guess you'd say, like, it fell into this use pattern that tracked, I think, with how vapes became popularized among young people in the last, 10 years. Young people who grew up with flavored vapes were like, well, this is just another, you know, consumable legal substance you can buy in the store and just do anytime you want. It became adopted by rappers and especially in the last sort of 6 or 7 years. Around 2020, a number of rappers in Atlanta started, I think they were drawn just to the drug just because it's like, it's a recreational drug, but also because it has this sort of subcultural kind of edgy association. And so rappers like Young Thug and Gunna, who are very influential among young people, very popular, started posting photos and videos of themselves consuming nitrous. And then Kanye also became probably the single most influential rapper of my generation, started using it. The manufacturers leaned into that. They started branding it in ways that dovetailed with rap culture, and they started selling it in smoke shops next to weed paraphernalia. For example, a company called Galaxy Gas, the name itself, like the association of getting high, like, it took off on social media. Like there were all these kind of crazy videos coming out of initially from Atlanta of young people consuming galaxy gas, and it has this, dramatic effect. Like you kind of your voice changes, you slump over. It makes for crazy short form video content. That just like took it to another level of virality.
Ezra, you mentioned Galaxy Gas, which is one of the biggest brands in the US. And I just want to add their statement, which is that they said their products are for responsible culinary use only. And they said they're deeply concerned about the recent news reports and social media posts of individuals illegally misusing their products. What is the legal status of nitrous in the US now?
It remains legal. It is, it is there in Louisiana has banned the recreational sale of it. As far as I know, no other states have taken that step. Doesn't seem to be a huge priority for regulators here in the States. Theoretically, you're not allowed to sell nitrous for recreational use. But that's essentially, that just means that in smoke shops, they just have to say they're selling it as a culinary product or something that, is you're using it to make flavored whipped cream or something like that. Even if you're selling it in a shop that is not stocking any other culinary products and is selling, you know, bongs and cigarettes and other consumables.
Ezra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And it's not just in the States, it's also big in Nigeria. And our colleague BBC journalist Chigozie Oaxaca has been looking into how it's used there.
Although there isn't comprehensive data that sheds light on the illicit use and sale of nitrous oxide, also called laughing gas, here in Nigeria, I can say with a degree of confidence that it is fairly widespread among young Nigerians, especially in major cities like Lagos, Abuja, and Owerri. So to give a bit of context, in 2023, there was a report by the local media of the brazen abuse of nitrous oxide by young Nigerians. So the Nigerian Drug Law Enforcement Agency swung into action. There were interceptions at the border as much as 6 tons, at some point. They closed the outlets that give access to young people. After the clampdown, the numbers came down. But even as such today, you will still see posts as early as January 2025 or December 2024 of young people still using nitrous oxide in Nigeria in party settings. I think at this point it's important to note that nitrous oxide is not legally banned in Nigeria. I mentioned earlier on about a clampdown by the authority in 2023. So the result of this was like the illegal sellers of nitrous oxide retreated in the shadows. They now sold only to old customers, and new customers only came through referrals, and they did the delivery themselves. There's also a very high likelihood that encrypted messaging apps like Telegram are also used as a bridge between the buyers and the sellers. I spoke with a journalist based in Owerri, and he told me that people can easily get access to nitrous oxide. He mentioned some streets that you could walk in and you could buy nitrous oxide. You can use it without fear of intervention or arrest by the police. So I think a lot has been done, but a lot still needs to be done in regards to controlling the abuse of nitrous oxide in Nigeria.
So, Eve, we heard how authorities are trying to clamp down on it in Nigeria, and here in the UK, possession was made illegal in 2023, which means that if you're caught with it, you could get a caution, you could get a fine, and repeat offenders could go to prison. Where else has it been banned?
So in most countries, it is a controlled substance and it isn't allowed to be used recreationally. However, in a lot of countries, it can be legally sold and purchased as a culinary product. Some countries have completely banned the substance outright and possession is a crime, the UK being one of them recently. In Europe, it's also been banned in Ireland, Lithuania, and the Netherlands, which is unusual because the Netherlands tend to have more liberal rules around drugs. In Asia, it's been banned in Thailand and Vietnam. However, it still remains pretty popular, especially amongst people travelling in the region.
So governments have been trying to crack down on this. How effective have those crackdowns been?
I think if you walk through the streets of London, where possession of the drug is illegal, it seems pretty clear a lot of people are still using it unless they're deciding to whip cream in the middle of the night in the road. More and more we're seeing these American-style big flavoured canisters on the streets.
I guess it's like most places, you can still get hold of illegal drugs if you really look for them, and it's happening, all around us, but we wouldn't necessarily know about it. But with laughing gas, it's different because there are these waste products that you just see everywhere.
Absolutely.
Eve, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah.
That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Hannah Gelbart, and this is What in the World from the BBC World Service. We'll see you next time.